Next we have cutting tools. So again, full disclosure, I don't have all the tools here. I definitely have been meaning to step up my cutting game as far as my cutting tools, but I just have some tried and true ones that I've used and I haven't had any issues. I do believe a couple of these can definitely make my life a little bit easier. However, right now I just focus on the couple of cutting tools that I have here available. I have been going back and forth with a couple of these, but until I feel like I really need them and they're really affecting as far as my output, right now I'm just going to hold off on those. So let's start off with the snips. These are like everything. If you don't get anything else here aside from your basic scissors, these are everything. These little things I haven't been able to find. I got these from Joann's a couple of years ago. I've been looking to purchase like 3 more specifically designed like this, obviously with this sort of cushion around it. I have not been able to find it. I don't know if they discontinued or what, but I haven't been able to find another one. So I'm just kind of stuck with these, but definitely get these. There are so many uses for these snips. They quickly cut fabric. If you're trying to get a stitch out really quickly, like there are so many uses for these snips, but they're also a little bit tricky because you can easily accidentally cut a piece of fabric because they're super sharp and they're super precise. But I can definitely tell you, just based on even the handling of it, you definitely want to pick up a pair of snips. And like I said, these are my favorite. I got them from Joann's a couple of years ago. Haven't been able to see any more because I'll even get the same exact style like 3 times because I love these so much and I don't want them to get damaged or dull or lost. I'm kind of terrified of that with these, but yeah, definitely encourage you to pick up a pair of snips, maybe a couple, because you're definitely going to, once you get the hang of using these, they're definitely going to be vital to your sewing. So definitely pick up snips. Okay, then we have just the standard cutting scissors. What you'll want to remember about your scissors, you'll want to have a couple. I have 3 that I use pretty often, including the snips. But what you'll want to focus on is the fact that each of the shears or the scissors, you have to make sure that they stay where they're supposed to stay as far as what you're using them for. So these I specifically use for just paper. I don't ever cut any fabric with these scissors. They're only for paper. I specifically use these for paper. Everyone in my household knows, don't touch my scissors because it's that serious. Once you become more familiar, or if you're already familiar with it, you understand how important it is to have a pair of good shears when you are cutting fabric. It's vital. Okay. So you want to make sure you have specific scissors just for cutting paper. Then I have just my standard shears that I use, and it depends on these. I enjoy with the more plastic top because it gives me more control when I am cutting slippery fabrics. And so when I'm cutting chiffon or silk or very slippery fabrics, for some reason the plastic handle and this gives me a lot more control and precision, and it even allows me to utilize the very top portion to get a good cut in. So I use these specifically for more finer fabrics. And again, I don't cut anything remotely related to paper with these. They're specifically for fabric and definitely for the finer fabrics. Okay, then I have my metal, bit more heavy duty scissors, tailoring shears. And these I focus on my heavier bridal fabrics that have to do with like satin, taffeta, Dupani, like the really stiffer, firmer fabrics. I use these for. They give me more control and they actually can handle a better cut than the pink scissors can. So this is what I've just become familiar with over my years of sewing. And these are just the main basic scissors that I use. You'll also see these embroidery or trimming, these embroidery scissors. And I just use these when I'm doing hand sewing and I just want more control. And I definitely use these when I'm doing lace. When I'm cutting lace, I have 2 ways that I cut lace, and this I usually use to sort of clean it up, but I do use a soldering iron to cut my lace. And once we get on to that portion of the assignment, you'll see how I use the iron to cut my lace. But when I'm going in and sort of like clipping stray pieces of lace or just the trim away from the lace, then I use these. They give me more control and they're easier to handle than even the snips. So these are the main basic ones I use. If you see in the book, you have the bent-handed, And those I would say are more for tailors that are cutting jackets and have like this huge space, and they need to sort of have that control where your hand is on the table and you're able to take it across nice and smoothly and cut in a perfect and straight line. The bent scissors definitely give you more control. Pinking shears. You can see pinking shears have a bit of a zigzag finish to them, and those are normally used as a finisher when you have like a decorative seam that you want to cover, or you want to use it as a finisher or something like that. It neatens the seam out. I don't use them mainly because the kind of fabrics that I deal with, there is no shortcut to finishing. Like, you have to finish it. It has to be some sort of actual finish to it, a particular technique, a particular seam. So I haven't found the necessity of having pinking shears. Maybe you might use them in your sewing. In my sewing, I haven't had the need to use them quite as much, even at all, because a lot of my finishes have to have had actual techniques with them. So those are the main ones that I use for sewing. Now we have other tools as far as the rotary cutter. I don't have one of my own, but I've heard great things about the rotary cutter. I heard it changes everything as far as if you're especially when you're cutting patterns. So whereas these, you kind of have to pick up the fabric and cut around it, the rotary cutter just requires you to seamlessly and smoothly go around the curves and different things like that. So I'm definitely in the market for a rotary cutter, and you'll probably see me using one in future lessons, just to kind of, we'll go through that together as far as using a rotary cutter. And you also need the accompanying mat, because obviously the rotary cutter will cut into anything underneath it. So you need that specific mat to make sure you're not cutting up the table or anything else underneath it. Next, we have the buttonhole cutter, and this is something, again, I covered when we were doing the basic sewing kit. And again, once you become more familiar with cutting open buttons, you'll see how useful this is. So even though we have the seam ripper here, and you're like, well, why would I use a seam ripper as a cutting tool? Actually, the seam ripper is quite a beneficial cutting tool as well. If you look inside this groove inside, you'll see that this actually is a bit sharp, and as much as it cuts loose threads and seams, it also can be what you use to puncture the buttonhole and kind of slide it through. So you can actually use this or this. So this creates a nice, perfect hole inside the button, but this also kind of allows you to puncture the buttonhole initially and kind of like slide it through, so that you also can use this both as a cutting option. Okay, so even though you think the seam ripper is just for removing seams, it also can be used as a cutter, because you have this groove in here that allows you to sort of puncture and slide across. So these are some of the tools that you can use to assist you in your cutting. And again, you can decide what you become more comfortable using. You may have to get all these, you may only need a couple of them, but I can say you will need a majority of them. Maybe there's one or two things you might not use, but you will need a majority of these tools if you want to have just a better sewing experience and have more convenient access to just not having to worry so much about this. The better tools you have, the easier it will be to complete your projects. I can definitely tell you that. Although it seems like a lot, the better the tools are, the more familiar you are with the tools, the better your sewing will be. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Videos are uploaded weekly covering dressmaking, fashion, lectures, and more.